Hi, everybody. This is 63 days since Richard was forcibly removed from his barracks room and his life was taken from him. And then there was a cover up, and it was a cover up so big, people couldn't believe it. We couldn't believe it. But the evidence kept saying it. The evidence kept saying this was um, a institutional cover up, and it was big, and we're like, okay, so why would they 15 plus agencies? No big case has ever had 15 plus agencies for a task force, right? So many agencies involved, DHS and CID and FBI and ATF and Interpol and Mexican government, Mexican military, um, the Texas Rangers, the sheriffs, um, the command, I can go on and on, CPS, CBS, CBP, sorry, CBP. It just goes on and on, to list all of the agencies involved, and it makes you wonder why we're even paying taxes, because we have so many agencies and so little justice accountability for this criminal trafficking. Hundreds of thousands of children being trafficked. Our sons and daughters that want to serve in the military are being targeted, are absolutely being targeted right there where they live in the barracks. The barracks are uh, it just breed. What can I call areas where they entrap and compromise our soldiers. They compromise them by bringing in young girls, younger than what they can be, 14-year-old girls, and then pimping them out, videotaping them. Then, of course, you have all the substance abuse. They're allowing the substances to go in. They're allowing all of the grog, right? They had all the grog, and these weapons, right? All kinds of weapons, even snakes and all that, things that are not legal for the barracks. The barracks are supposed to be very disciplined places that you'd want to live, right? Where you can get some peace and quiet. And that's not what's happening, right? You have all of this money. We have $1 trillion military, and they can't even secure the barracks of our soldiers in a disciplined fashion, following SOPs, so that they have a place that they can count on, and would want to live. It's huge. Thank you, Anicia, for coming on tonight. And that just and why do I say that? Because I had the SOPs. I have the SOPs from Richard's file that were in Richard's possessions, two sets of them, and every standard operating procedure has been violated. I can't find any that they followed. And that means that they're targeting. They're not focusing on following the SOPs to keep our sons and daughters in the barracks safe, right? Safe and in good order and checked upon, right? We had um, um, Caleb Smithers uh, in the fifth stage of decomposition when they found him in the barracks. That means nobody was checking on him. That means there were no checks. So um, and you have the Asia Graham case, right? So you have this huge problem, and that's called the treason, the traitorous actions, the negligence. I don't even call it negligence, because this is intentional. You can't have all of those SOPs being broken and this not be intentional. They were absolutely, you can't have 14-year-old girls living in the barracks for 4 months, 4 months being, and that's in the news, okay? That's all documented in the news. Um, for 4 months being quote unquote prostituted out, and without the intentional targeting, and trying to compromise our soldiers. And we've just were like, why are they doing that? That's treason. I mean, that's absolutely sabotaging our military, right? And our national defense. That's sabotaging our national defense. What are they doing? And then evidence confirmed that they were involved um, in contracts, and for personal gain, the whole criminal trafficking and contracts. The contracts are huge, right? And of course, the criminal trafficking, be it the substances, be it the films of the worst type of crimes against children, be it the weapons and the ammunition and the equipment. They were absolutely grand theft, larceny, and the worst type of crimes, um, engaged in. Our military leadership engaged in the worst type of crimes, and it goes to people that we really looked up to, really trusted, right? We're talking about 4-star generals, 3-star generals. We're talking about the IG of the Army, the Provost Marshal of the Army. We're talking about our CID, and they are just traitors. They're absolutely treasonous. They absolutely have been servicing foreign and domestic enemies, and uh, sabotaging our military and our national security. And that's because who are they dealing with? They're dealing with the Mexican cartel. But the point that people don't realize is that the Mexican cartel, Mexico, is in the web of the CCP. They're absolutely in the web of the CCP, and it's all over the news. You have to just look it up, do a little bit of search, and you'll find out what's going on in Mexico. In May alone, 80 executions Chihuahua, in Chihuahua, right in Juarez. 80 executions alone. These are cartel-tied. Um, it is a war zone over the border. It is absolutely, because they are there. It's You have President Trump right now, um, securing that border, securing or vetting who gets visas or not. You see the Marco list, the Marco Rubio. He is taking away visas from Chinese CCP students, right? Because or even Chinese students, without being part of the party, because the CCP has said any Chinese person that is over here, it has to be uh, I want to get the right words, like an active mole, right, for the CCP. And this is a real problem for our national security. And so Marco Rubio is taking away their visas, is sending them home. They can go be moles at home, right? They can go be moles at home, not in our country, because we want to protect our national security. And so there's, uh, uh, but they're in Mexico. And if you went to, that's why one of the first places that Hegseth went, that Marco Rubio went, was to Panama, because the Panama Canal is so important. And what were the signs? And the signs were in Chinese. This is how far along the sabotage has gotten, sabotaging the Mexican sovereignty, right? The Mexican sovereignty has been sabotaged, and that's why you have this, like, a war zone over there. I mean, 80 executions in 1 month, right? Wow. wow, and I know that some of those are generals, right? I know that some of those are government officials, and so this is what is going on in El Paso, because El Paso is the front door to the United States. And so the front door to Chihuahua, to Juarez, Mexico. And so that was creeping over, and absolutely has sabotaged the law enforcement and the judicial system there in El Paso. And you have people that took advantage of that, aligned with that. It is absolutely known that the Mexican cartel with the CCP is actively recruiting, and they're recruiting in the military, right? They're recruiting in the U.S. military. Why? Because we have $1 trillion budget for our military. There's a lot of money. That's a lot of money, y'all. That's a lot of money to try to get a piece of, right? That's pretty easy pickings to get a piece of, because we have so many traders. We have so many traders that are willing to be compromised and to actively facilitate um, the compromising of our young sons and daughters, because they've got them all together in the barracks, and they can absolutely do some mind control, or just entrap them with videos to get a little grog in them, and send over some young girls that might not look so young, but they are. They might not act so young, but they are, and film them and everything, and then they can actively traffic hundreds of thousands of children through Fort Bliss on the American dime, and that American dime gets paid out in contracts. And this is why you have General John Kelly being a traitor, treasonous, because he actively was getting contracts from the military for these emergency intake centers that house these children. And where are the children, right? That house the children. But you also had NGOs that were getting money too, and we're going to talk about the Annunciation House that uh, Ken Paxton just won. The Supreme Court sided with him with his case against the Annunciation House, which will allow him to go and look at all of the paperwork. But, you have what was going on Fort Bliss, an absolute travesty of criminal trafficking. And I've heard so many witness testimonies on it, and they call it the death camp. They call Fort Bliss the death camp, the emergency intake center, the death camp. And we know that they're missing. These children are missing, so many of them. They found some, but you're talking about hundreds of thousands. And now the news is finally admitting that there was 7,300 child abuse cases that the Biden administration totally ignored, did not do anything about it. Um, you know, and I'm sure that those cases had some kind of open checkbook, and they were just raking in the money to delay, and not doing anything. Does that sound familiar? That sounds like the Walmart mass shooting case, right? Where they just get an open checkbook, and the lawyers just rake in a bunch of money, and I'm sure, do some quid pro quo, and they just rake in the money from taxpayer funds. And so this is, really grand theft larceny on so many levels. And so that is the motive um, behind why this big criminal group network would be really unhappy with Richard, right? Really unhappy with him, to target him, to take his life, to smear him and cover him up, and um, and and just be absolutely brutal to his remains, and not give us his remains, because his remains are absolutely evidence of their brutality, of the hate that they had for our son. Because why? Because he was a witness. He was a witness, not uh, he was a witness in the investigations and the audits in Trump's cases, in Trump's investigations on the border in El Paso, the criminal trafficking along the border, and in Fort Bliss, and creeping into Fort Bliss, and really, uh, grand theft larceny, but more so the criminal trafficking with the children, and the targeting of our soldiers, that creates national security breach and threat. And we know that they weren't even keeping Fort Bliss secure. There were absolutely breaches in the security at Fort Bliss, and you see that with the handling of Richard's case. And you see that with the 14-year-old girl living in the barracks for 4 months. You see that with the girls being brought in, the young girls being brought in during the lockdown, the lockdown when the gates were locked down, 2020, 2021, was just all out mutiny against President Trump. And, so let's take Trump's name out of this. So you have a president that wants to secure the border, that wants to look at where the fraud, waste, and abuse is, because we have so much debt. And, he wants to analyze the military that he's commander in chief over. So he starts auditing. So he starts investigating, so that he can make, he's a builder, so he can make things better. This is what a president is supposed to do. He is supposed to give us a State of the Union. He's supposed to give us the state of our military. He's the commander in chief, and he's also the chief law enforcer. So he's supposed to give us the state of our law enforcement community. And he is also the chief magistrate. He's supposed to give us the state of the union when it comes to our judicial system and progress, and to keep us um, being able to pursue our dreams, to pursue the American dream, right? That's his job. And the president was doing that. And he was investigating and he was auditing. And every president should be able to audit our military. They should be able to absolutely get answers for where all the money is being spent. We have $1 trillion military. They need to have a good accounting system. And in today's world, with all of the QuickBooks and all of that, they should absolutely be able to have a good accounting system and tell us where we're spending our money, so that we can be the best and the brightest and absolutely the most lethal military in the world, so that no one messes with us. But and the best trained, right? The best trained. So he had every right as president of the United States to investigate and audit. But because of, and we know this with the Briones family, with the Poison Ponds, Operation Poison Ponds, that El Paso was up to no good. That these traders, these cartel-tied contractors that didn't have the best interests of the United States or the community of El Paso in their heart. They didn't hold El Paso in their heart like we have always done, because I was born there at White Sands, and went to school in El Paso, and love the borderland. Always love the borderland. But it is a place that uh, you know um, because there's so much money to be got, and because it is on the border, it needs to be even more protected than like a city that's in the inner part of the United States. there has to be a lot of protection there because it is ripe for fraud, waste, and abuse. And they weren't vigilant. Matter of fact, they were compromised. And you have, contracts everywhere, and it's coming through the border. And they made deals with the cartel. The cartel came over. You saw that with Luis Rene Diaz right there, the manager, the chief of staff for usurper Bill Hicks, right there in the prosecutor's office in El Paso, without any kind of background check because he's a criminal, right? He's an indicted criminal, and cartel, and made a plea deal, whatever. Um, but but it just shows you that there was infiltration, that there was collusion between the cartel and American officials, that there were narco politicians, right? That's what this shows you. And we know of the big Mormon uh, um, um, connection here in this case. There is this common denominator of so many Mormons, and we know that the Mormons have vast land in Chihuahua, and we know that they are connected to everything that is going on in Mexico and also in El Paso. And so you have this CCP cartel tied, and that is coming into El Paso, the CCP, an infiltration of a foreign country that has already attacked so much of the sovereignty of Mexico, and now they want to infiltrate into the United States. And you see that where they're into all the universities, um, and so this is, you have to ask yourself, do you want to be CCP or do you want to be America? Do you want to be the United States Constitution? Do you want to have our rights? Well, that doesn't come free. That doesn't come free, even though it makes us free. It doesn't come free. We have to absolutely be vigilant. And because I guess, and I know this, this is what, as homeschoolers, we instilled in our children. And, when Richard joined the military, he knew that he needed to join to serve. And I don't know how many times I've told our children and told Richard, when you go, you have to ask, um, how can I help? How can I make the world a better place, right? How can I make the world a better place? And not focus on yourself, but how can I be of service to our country, to the unit, um, and so he began his career in the military with just absolute aspiration. Distinguished honor graduate, number one in his cycle for basic training, got $500 for that, and an AIT also number one, guide on bearer, and so then was deployed. And even in deployment, he said it was very, very bad. So they were up to no good. And they, and so this circles back to why would they compromise the soldiers? And that is because, soldiers like Richard, that have a love for the country, that have a love for service, that want to do the right thing, that want to look to the future, to their dreams and pursue their dreams, they become whistleblowers. They become protectors of the dream, of the Constitution. They actually defend the Constitution. And so they become whistleblowers, they become witnesses. And so if you compromise them, you can blackmail them, right? And they attempted to compromise everybody, right? They attempted to compromise everybody so that they can blackmail them and they can say, shut up, otherwise I'll bring out the video we have of you. Um, or we will retaliate through UCMJ. We will abuse our power and retaliate against you and ruin your career. And one thing about Richard too is he just couldn't sell out. Okay, then I'll just get out. He knew that there was a life beyond the military. Even if he couldn't pursue his dream in the military, he could pursue it some other way. The one of the wonderful stories that we did during homeschooling was Turnberry. And if you're not familiar with Turnberry, Turnberry is in Scotland and it is owned right now by President Trump, which is just amazing, right? It is amazing because Turnberry is a historical place in Scotland. It is the birthplace of Robert the Bruce. Robert the Bruce won liberation from the from Britain. Um, he just was amazing, just amazing. He had flaws, right? He absolutely learned the hard way because he betrayed William Wallace. And William Wallace ended up being murdered, being killed and dismembered. Um, and Robert the Bruce had been betrayed because part of the deal was not to do that to him, right? But he wanted to have sovereignty for Scotland, and people don't know about that President Trump owns Turnberry, the very birthplace of Robert the Bruce. And Robert the Bruce is really the original Spider-Man. Um, and if you look it up in his kilt, he'll have a spider embroidered in his kilt. And why is that? Because when he was at his lowest point, he was hiding in a cave and he was watching the spider. And the wind would always come and blow the web away and mess it up, and the spider would never give up and go back and build its web, and then the wind would come or water wave would come and mess it up again, and the spider would never give up and would build it again, and that went on and on. And Robert the Bruce realized that he could never give up, that he has to be like a spider. He has to be like a Spider Man. He has to be a Spider Man and never, ever give up. Well, who do you hear that from? That's President Trump. He says, never, ever give up. Fight, fight, fight. And he owns Turnberry. And, so never, ever, ever give up. You've got to do what's right, and you can never give up. And so and he was at a very, very low point. And he came back never giving up, just like President Trump. And he won sovereignty for Scotland. Um, and look at what President Trump, he won the presidency again with the popular vote, And so he has all the legitimacy, not like James Montoya, who has no legitimacy, not like Bill Hicks, who has no legitimacy, and not like Bob Moore of El Paso Matters, who doesn't really have any legitimate, well, he's making the story about Annunciation House, right? Without revealing that his parent company, where he gets paid from, has a conflict of interest, was giving money, uh, over $120,000 that we know of to Annunciation House. This is a huge conflict of interest, and he should reveal it in the article. That an amicus about his bias reporting and untransparent reporting was already a complaint was put in about El Paso Matters, and he didn't reveal that in the Annunciation House case. An amicus was submitted, and he didn't reveal that. So this is all like political. They are activists. He is a disgraced reporter, and that he went on with Christine Ramirez on this. Gosh, um, she needs to run. She needs to run real, real far away from Bob Moore because he's toxic. He's absolutely toxic. So going back to one point I want to make about Robert the Bruce that I love, that I absolutely love. If you love history, but it has huge implications on the United States, and you see that with President Trump, but also in in uh, in a very big way, um, because Robert the Bruce is the forefather of Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee is the bluest blood in the United States that the United States has ever seen. He is royalty. He's the bluest blood we ever had, Robert E. Lee. And he was absolutely magnificent general, and taught us a lot of lessons. So if you haven't studied Robert E. Lee and his documents and his letters, along with George Washington and Robert the Bruce, um, I guarantee you that President Trump has. I guarantee you, because you can't be an economist, you can't be a builder and a property developer, and get the property that he has, right? Without being interested in history. You just can't. And so, and when you absolutely look at history, you understand the consequences of being a traitor. You understand the consequences of committing a mutiny and treason. And that's what absolutely happened in 2019 and 2020, and on until President Trump took office in January 20th. And if you take his name off of that, I feel like I'm stomping for Trump, and I am. I guess I am. But the point is this is what a president is supposed to do and be. They're supposed to know property. George Washington absolutely designed Washington D.C. And they didn't take his advice. They didn't take his advice. He was a surveyor, and his advice and his whole plan for Washington D.C., because of it being along the Potomac and having that outlet to the ocean, was to be a manufacturing and trade capital of the world, not to be a Versailles, not to be a memorial type city. He didn't want that. He didn't want a memorial type capital. He wanted a productive, a producer, a manufacturing city as a capital of the United States. And that's why he picked the land that Washington, D.C. sits on, because it has access to West Virginia for the coal, for the fuel, and it has access to the waterways for trade. And that's what he wanted. And you know why he wanted it? He goes, because that's going to end slavery. It's going to end slavery. It brings the North and the South together, and manufacturing will bring real wages to workers, and slavery won't be necessary. And so, if you read his documents, that was his plan to end slavery. And it was just really magnificent when you read through his beautiful words, and what he was up against. Because he was up against a lot of mutiny people too, and foreign interests, and those foreign interests were British. Okay, those foreign interests were, the British, a little bit different than the CCP nowadays, but it really, when you read it, and you understand it, and you understand what a lack of education that we're getting. Um, because I only learned this from being a homeschool mom, from saying, okay, now I have to teach them a little bit of this. Let me read some of this. And I'm like, wow, wow, I didn't learn this. I didn't learn this. Um, and it was just uh, really helpful during this whole thing with Richard is to know um, that there are infiltrators, that there are enemies, that there is always a deep state because that's just the way the world works. There's always someone wanting to take your sovereignty, there's always someone wanting to take your wealth, your energy, your land, your people. They want to compromise your people. They want to make your people sick. They want to, and so we have to be on guard. We have to be vigilant. And, and this leads into now um, um, Julio Cordero, who was absolutely a stellar FBI agent. Did you hear what I just said? Julio Cordero was a stellar FBI agent. And he was the lead FBI agent on the Operation Poisoned Pawns. Pawns being Pawns, like on a chessboard. Poisoned pawns. And this is another way of saying compromised narco politicians and officials that have absolutely sold their souls, sold their future, sold their children's future for their own personal gain, sold out their country for personal gain. And if you're in El Paso, you need to be extra vigilant because the temptations and the bribes and all of that is huge, and you see that in the Briones family. Um, and why am I pointing out the Briones family? Because in Poison Ponds, um, this judge, Dolores Briones, the sister of the federal judge, David Briones, was indicted and even spent time in prison for being compromised. And, she was getting like $3,000 a pop um, in gift cards uh, to, you know, uh, to be political, to rule in favor of whoever was giving her the bribe money. And that's on record. I'm not making that up. That's on record. And she was getting, loads of gift cards each, like with $3,000 on it. Um, and why is that important to know? Because Julio Cordero, who just recently lost his life uh, by El Paso ISD, is the one that was the lead investigator on that put her in prison. And I think that I'll leave it to you to think what you want about it, because our interest in all of this is, why did um, Delia Briones, the county clerk, uh, go along with James Montoya and commit this timestamp fraud of 2028. Okay. He could never have done what he did without the help of Delia Briones, the wife of federal judge David Briones. So the Briones family got a little drank the wrong type of liquid, drank the wrong type of water, I think. And they just went compromise. They just went traitor. They just went fraud. They just went because and what's happening is that El Paso is being very, very hurt by this fraud, because now they don't have a prosecutor. They don't have a legitimate prosecutor. And this is very personal to us because our son's case needs a prosecutor. and he absolutely needs to be arrested. He absolutely needs to be at this point. When you look at the case and you look at the level of fraud here, and what's going on, the only option is for him. It's kind of like with Leilani Hart. When you look at that case and how bad it is, the only option is arrest. The only option is that he needs to be arrested, just like Leilani Hart needs to be arrested, and the people of El Paso need to have a prosecutor, and and when I say the people of El Paso, I'm talking about us, because Richard is a people of El Paso and we are his name. We are working for his best interests, even post mortem, um, which is, I mean, he is in the line of duty. It just, I just can cry when I have to talk about this, because where's his remains, right? And they're just so compromised. For gift cards, for $3,000 gift cards, they will absolutely allow this to happen. And Richard's not the only case. Hundreds of thousands of children that they allow to happen for these $3,000 gift cards, so that they could go and go to Walmart and buy a new TV, or maybe buy a plane ticket and go have a trip to Paris or something. I mean, or go to Nevada, go to Las Vegas, so they get that, and they just sell out the whole community, the whole community. And so that's why we posted that, because uh, I think El Pasoans, including ourselves, this is very personal. I don't know how many cases have been botched, and because of no prosecutor, no legitimate prosecutor. And what is he doing? He's focusing on what was he came out and he was focusing on this Uber driver, right? Which is absolutely crazy, because she's gone. Her life, there's nobody is there. Nobody is there. Both the defendant and the victim, um, they're both deceased now, right? They're both deceased, and he's coming out and worried about this case when he has his own case to consider. He doesn't ask about his own 2028 stamp and say, "Come and arrest me, come and arrest me," because I need to think about my community. I need to think about the future, for my children, for my family, and I need to be loyal to the United States. If he did that, he would have himself arrested, because that's the biggest case right now. Because how else is any other case going to be prosecuted legitimately? Legitimately. So it's a mess, and the wife of a judge really allowed facilitated this kind of corruption. And that's it's just jaw dropping everywhere you look, everywhere you look. But you know what? It might be big to us. It might be overwhelming to us, but it is not for God. It's just not for God. God is the heavyweight champion of the world, right? He is the heavyweight champion. He's the one that gives us weight itself, matter itself. So, I don't know how many times I said that to the kids too, so that they never, ever, ever give up. We've got to be like the spider. We've got to be Spider-Man. Never, ever, ever give up. And I think President Trump has that same attitude, right? I mean, he's proven it. Evidence shows that he never, ever, ever gives up. So I think, you know, um, um, Julio Cordero never, ever gave up. Okay, even though he was retired, I don't think he ever, ever gave up. I think being a stellar FBI agent in El Paso is very rare, very rare, is absolutely remarkable, is absolutely heroic, and it takes such a character, and that character is one that, in my opinion, is a type that would never ever give up. He was like a Spider-Man, right? Never ever give up. And so, even through his hard times, I really think he was investigating something in someone, and I think that he was about to expose something. Um, and that's just my opinion, from what I know about the case, and he lost his life. So we have work to do to share information, to let everyone know that Bob Moore is absolutely toxic, that he is fake news, that he is unreliable, that he cannot be trusted, that he is not transparent, that he's very biased. I think that that is really important for people to understand, that his stories can't be trusted. And of course, in our son's case, is the greatest example of that. And they try to promote it, but it's just cannot be trusted at all, because it comes from the hand of Bob Moore, and he doesn't call. I mean, how can you write a story about Richard without contacting family? He never contacted us. How can you write an honest story and not reveal that you are part of the case? You're part of the case. He's not just an outsider looking in, he's a part of the case. And this Annunciation House is a very good example of how he's just toxic, and he's just part of the rot of El Paso. He's just part of the rot. He just gives you false narratives. He wants to make Google eyes in people so that they don't look at El Paso Community Foundation. They're trying to control the narrative, and I think people are seeing through it. We're seeing through it, and so that is really, if you have, thank you, Martha, for coming on. And then, of course, with these FBI's podcasts, I don't know if anybody listened to that or whatever. Please give me your opinion. But talking to more people today, because we had to get that out really quick yesterday. We wanted to make sure people understood that there was a huge chance that what they were doing was illegal, that it violated um, um, their regulations, right? I shouldn't say illegal, but that it violated their regulations. And today we absolutely confirmed that what they were doing, profiting off of the Walmart mass shooting, the worst um, tragedy in El Paso, and being former FBI, retired FBI agents, and saying that we have the truth, like the FBI was saying lies to the community, and we know that the whole truth hasn't come out, right? But the FBI agent can't do that. Okay, they're very highly regulated. It's not like uh, our family, your family, we can say, wait a minute, something stinks. There's multiple shooters, and Patrick Crucius is a patsy, and they just wanted that application for appointed counsel to be approved so that they can have an open checkbook, so that they can do the grand theft larceny. We can say all that, right? We can say all of the Mayella Crucius marriage. We can say Michael G. Mayella working for Walmart. That really stinks. Being in the FBI, that really stinks, and say we're investigating. Him being in the DA's office with James Montoya, that's super, super stinky, because Jaime Esparza should have recused himself. He had a conflict of interest. His sister was at the Walmart during the shooting, and he called him, and he came, and he walked the crime scene before it was even secured, which is tampering with a crime scene. Um, you know, so we can say all of that, right? We can say all these parts of the Walmart mass shooting. We can talk about Ernest Christopher Grant and Donna Sifford and their and Chris Cuomo and all of that. We can talk about all of that, but as an FBI former agent that's retired and gets retirement from the FBI, they are very highly regulated. It's kind of like, uh, you know, Rob being retired military. He has to, he wants to preserve the reputation of the military. And when things like this happen to your family, it's kind of hard to control your tongue. So here I am on every day. Um, but we love the military, and the FBI agents should love the FBI, or at least just be quiet. Just be quiet and let other people. I think the media should have held the broadcast, um, not former FBI agents. That is a real conflict of interest and a violation of regulations. And it's dangerous for the country. So, you know, so that's why we didn't participate in that. I think you just have to be, for us, we're always trying to be very, very patient. And that's why sometimes it takes so long for all of this, because we just want to be extra careful, um, moving forward. But it's absolutely happening. And victory is in our grasp. I can tell you that. Victory is in our grasp. And what would be victory? Victory would be holding these people accountable and getting Richard's remains. That would be victory. Now, that, 4 years ago, think about it. Think about it. It was just absolutely a big green machine. Um, and and we had no clue how big it was. But now, God's grace, oh my gosh, and so many things have been revealed. Um, so that needs to get out. It is the sharing of the story that gets all this, that gets us justice. Remember, in the Bible, it's the old widow that nags and nags and nags and nags that gets justice from an unjust judge, from a corrupt judge, right? So we just ask, please share. Please nag, 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 nag. Please share, 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 because that's how we're going to get victory. And what they did, just don't even believe me. Just look at the evidence. Mayela Crucia's marriage, right? Um, Leilani Hart, Jay Pollan, Ruggiero. We have so much on Ruggiero and his wife, Gema Xóchitl. Um, Cruel, uh, I'm not saying her name right. Um, Queller, whatever. Uh, it is just so much. There's so much there, and I'll start talking about that too. But this whole thing with Julio Cordero, what's going on with that is big part of this case, and of course, Nidal Baem being related to Manuel Chavira of the El Paso ISD, the police chief, no less, the police chief, and being in laws with the Texas Ranger that was assigned to our case, Gustavo Sanchez, also uh, related to Nidal Baem, and then connected to Arturo Alba and Willie Moya and Luis Rene Diaz, and KTSM, David Candelera and Danae Katz and Rosa Maria, absolutely cartel tied. And those cartel ties have strings to the CCP. That is, and Richard was a witness to the investigations and the audits, and he was a willing witness. That is what made him a whistleblower. He actually filed reports. He actually filed reports and was in communication with them. And so he was a willing witness. And I can't even imagine how scared he was, right? I can't even imagine. Um, and and because he was willing, because he knew what was, you don't have to be like this real, oh, I'm a whistleblower. A lot of times you're a whistleblower and you're shaking, but you're doing the right thing. So I don't know. I can't even imagine what he went through. And with all the retaliation, and you see um, Glennon Oakley Jr., and you're just like, the day of the Walmart mass shooting, and the next day he was just a totally different person, totally bullied, totally intimidated, totally harassed. You just saw it. It was right there. He started crying. Um, but he was absolutely a willing whistleblower. And what did they say? They said, take down everything from your social media. They gave him orders. And yeah, this was a mutiny. This was an absolute mutiny against President Trump. And, um, and whistleblowers were not tolerated in that mutiny. They were not tolerated at all. And it is absolute treason what they did, and they need to be held accountable. So I think it's all coming together, and we appreciate your prayers. Yesterday was Ascension um, Day. I hope everyone had a good one. I wanted to mention that last night, but uh, I didn't do that, and yeah. So I thought, okay, today I'll absolutely mention that because that is a happy time, right? That is a real joyous time, the Ascension, and so thank God for holidays, right? Thank God for um, those happy reminders, and that's what yesterday was. So well, now it's almost 1 o'clock in the morning here. So thank you so much. God bless you. And I will be back tomorrow, God willing. And thank you, Martha, for coming on.